Hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining Exercise Etc. for the webinar From Good to Great. We thank you guys so much for joining us. And what we've got today is a wide variety of exercises that you're going to be able to take back to your clients that give a different spin on some of the traditional options for both toning, conditioning, as well as some different more advanced options. My name is April Bolter, and I will be spending the next couple of hours with you guys taking you through all of these options. As you guys can see, I am currently in the Windy City. I've recently had a change in job since we did this. I'm still with Loyola University Chicago, but now I am a member of the faculty in the Exercise Science Department as well as the Director of Fitness and Aquatics within Loyola. So we've had some growth in the department, some changes and whatnot. If you are ever in the Chicago area and you'd be interested in stopping by and seeing some of our facilities or just taking a look at our campus, at the end of every webinar, I do give you my email address. And I do that for a couple of different reasons. You may have a question over something that we spoke about, and so you may want to be able to reach out to someone to get that question answered. So I do give you my email address for that reason. As well as if you're ever in Chicago and you'd like to see our facilities, or maybe you need some recommendations on restaurants, feel free to reach out. I am happy to help. I have a couple of different roles at Loyola, both as being a member of the faculty. I teach in the Exercise Science Department, teaching some of the Exercise Science 101 and 301 level courses. So that's where I spend some of my time, but the majority of my time is spent as the Director of Fitness and Aquatics. So I oversee all of the open recreation programming that happens within our rec center, as well as oversee all of the different staff that goes within that fitness area. And that includes our weight room supervisors, our personal trainers, our group fitness instructors, as well as a number of adjunct staff that come in that work part-time, such as personal trainers, and they're not necessarily all students. As you see, I'm certified by the American Council on Sports Medicine, American Council on Exercise, ASA, Yoga Fit, as well as teaches a variety of lifeguard and CPR courses for the American Red Cross. So if you ever have a question about anything that we talk about, or maybe you have a client that you don't really know how to work with, please feel free to reach out to me. If I can't answer the question, I'd be happy to reach out to a member of the Exercise Etc. faculty that may possibly know the answer. So if I can't help you, I'll be happy to find somebody that can. Now you're probably wondering how you're going to be getting your continuing education certificates, and I'll give you just a second to kind of read through these options, and then we'll talk about it here. What you're going to do is, first of all, is you're going to view this entire webinar. Then you'll want to make sure that your printer is turned on. So you're going to go to our website at www.exerciseetc.com, and you're going to look on the left-hand side. On the left-hand side, you're going to see something that says the Administration tab. You're going to click on Administration and then Webinar On Demand Certificates. You're going to complete all of the required fields and click the Submit button. From there, your continuing education certificate will appear on the screen. And you may either print it at that time or save it to your desktop. That way you have a copy of it. Please take note that the WebEx program records when you log on and log off. So if you log off early or fast forward to the end, then your CEC may be denied. Please remember to make sure that your printer is turned on, because if it is not turned on and you don't save your certificate, there is a fee to replace continuing education certificates. So you want to make sure that even if you cannot print it at that time, that you want to make sure you still save it, and then you can either email it or print it at a later date. Now we're going to start moving through. All right. Now here's what we're going to be looking at is what makes a great exercise. Now, as we start to look at this, a lot of the following characteristics are what makes an exercise greater. As we start to look through this, the number one is active core stabilization. Our active core stabilization that we're looking at is something that we want to take through all of our different exercises. So as we start to look through this core stabilization, what that means is that we want our participants to feel the body. So in order for this core stabilization to be enacted, our participants need to be supporting their own body weight. If you think about this in terms of our selectorized equipment, if someone is seated with their back against a pad, or maybe they're supine with their back on the pad, then that pad is doing the work of supporting the body. And that's not necessarily requiring as much core stabilization as if they were standing. So if you were seated doing an overhead press, your body is being supported by the bench, by the back pad. But if you're standing doing that overhead press, now your core is having to activate to keep that body in a neutral alignment. So a lot of these different exercises are requiring a higher level of core stabilization. And that's something that we're going to have to be looking at in order to make sure that we're really getting the best and most benefit from every single exercise. Now, in order to get this core stabilization, one of the most important things that we're doing here is we need to make sure that our core is engaged. And I'm going to talk you through building your own belt. Now, if you've been with me for any of our other exercises or any of our other webinars or even in-person seminars, you've probably done the build your own belt before. But this is something that I encourage you to do. If you're somewhere that you can stand up and do this with me, please do. If not, take notes and try it later whenever you're maybe in a less conspicuous space or in the privacy of your home if you're taking this webinar in public places. So first, what we do to build our own belt is we stand. I want you guys to stand up with your feet about hip-width distance apart. You want them to be at the distance, if you were to take your two hands, make fists, and put them together in between your feet. That's about the inner hip-width distance apart. And that's what we want our feet to be. That way we're nice and supported. Our hips are directly over our feet. Now what we want to do is to focus on our feet. I want you to spread all of your toes apart so that they are taking up all the space in your shoe. Or if you're barefoot, take up all the space in the room. So if you do that, now once your toes are nice and spread apart, I want you to grip the ground with them. So set them down so that each toe has its own space. Each toe has its own space in your shoe. Now you've probably noticed that when you did that, if you took all of your toes and gripped onto the floor so that each toe has its own space, you probably noticed that your weight shifted forward. So keep those toes engaged. Really grip the ground with them, but bring that weight back so it's centered more over the heel and the midfoot. So our toes are still holding on, but now our weight is shifted back, so we're much more even. Now with our toes holding on and we're pressing down and our weight is back, see if you can lift the arch of your foot up. Now if you've lifted the arch of your foot up and you're not used to engaging your feet like this, you may begin to feel a little cramp in the arch. So what we're going to do is just maintain that position. Our weight's still over the midfoot towards the heel. Our toes are gripping on, so our feet are nice and grounded right now. Now we're going to bring that energy up the body. What I want you to think about now is to take your middle finger and place it on the top of your hip, right there on that crest of the hip. Take your thumb and place it on your lowest rib. Without moving your body forward, so you cannot bend forward, you cannot crunch forward, I want you to engage those abdominals so that you lock your hip to the lowest rib. Remember, you can't lean forward though. Now, with those abdominals engaged, they're nice and tight, our feet are still grounded, our toes are gripping on, we're lifting our arch up, our abdominals are pulled in, we're nice and tight, our hip is locked to our rib cage. Our last step is to draw in that pelvic floor. These are the muscles that you would utilize if you were to stop yourself from urinating. So if you had to stop yourself from going to the bathroom, you would engage these muscles, drawing in that pelvic floor. Now if you've done this, our feet are still engaged, our arch is lifted, our weight is back in the heels, our toes are taking up their own space in the shoe, our hip and our lowest rib are locked together, those abdominals are engaged, our pelvic floor is drawn in. Right now your body is at its most stable. You have built your own belt. Your core stabilizers are engaged. So with every one of these exercises that we go through today, I want you to make sure that you bring it back to the basics. So every exercise should be utilizing this core stability by building your own belt with each and every time. Think about if you have older clients. I encourage you to have them work through this. We're such a forward society that oftentimes these abdominals become weak and tired. So we want to start with this core stabilization and activation because this is the beginning of every one of our exercises. This is our precursor. Still looking for with what makes exercise great, it has to utilize multiple joints. In order to utilize multiple joints, it has to be one of those big bang exercises. So a big bang exercise means that we're going to be burning more calories because it's a multi-joint movement. Think about it. What exercise is going to burn more calories? Squats and lunges or leg extensions and hamstring curls? If you think about it, leg extensions and hamstring curls are only really utilizing flexion and extension of the knee, where squats and lunges are utilizing flexion and extension of the ankle, of the knee, of the hip, as well as activation of the core. So because it's a much more multi-joint exercise, it's going to be burning many, many more calories. And that's something that's very important. Now, utilizing multiple muscle groups also goes along with function for real-life application. We want these to be very functional exercises. Now, I work in the field of health and fitness, and never in a daily life has anyone ever asked me to sit on a stability ball and do a bicep curl. And I work in health and fitness. So that means that's not a functional exercise. I understand how people say that it can carry over into functions of life because you have to perform one movement while stabilizing the body. But there are other exercises that we can do that are much more functional. Things like standing and pressing, being able to support our own body weight as we press and push. Those are very functional exercises. So that's what we want to focus on. And the risk of injury is low, but still has a high rate of return and benefit. Now we're going to move on. Now what we want to look at now is, does this really make a difference? And that answer is yes, it does make a difference. How we're going to do this is it's increasing the perceived value of training because our clients appreciate trainers who find creative exercises. Nobody really wants to pay a trainer for them to come in and to give them a list of exercises that they already know or that they already do. So these exercises are going to be utilizing a couple of different toys, so to speak. So we're going to be looking at utilizing monster bands and med balls. So these are ways that we are taking exercises and giving our clients more benefit. So they're going to be learning different ways to utilize these certain pieces of equipment that may be a little overwhelming if they are just going to the gym on their own. Because these are more challenging and of a higher difficulty, it's going to be less boredom for our clients. So much more higher rate of adherence. It's going to test clients both mentally and physically because they're going to have to really concentrate on these exercises. With a lot of these, there's going to be a large learning curve. So if we cannot get their body in the correct position, then they won't be doing these exercises. So we really want to make sure that we are having our clients be as safe and effectively challenged as possible. And it's going to help push clients to reach higher levels of fitness goals. Now, how we want to start is something really important. That's something we want to begin with. One is we want to proceed with caution. We want to start all programming with a proper screening and evaluation. So what does that mean? What is proper screening for our clients? One, we want to make sure that we have all of our clients filling out those health history packets. We want to make sure that we know everything going on with their joints. We're going to be working with some overhead options on some of our exercises today. So if we have clients with shoulder issues, we need to know about it because we need to be prepared to either make modifications or maybe take this exercise out. We also want to make sure that they understand what they're getting into, which is why our waivers and releases of liability are so important. So also what we want to do is to have a proper evaluation and assessment tool. So by a proper evaluation and assessment, we need to be performing those cardiovascular screenings, finding out what level are they at cardiovascular endurance, at muscular strength and endurance, and also finding out what level they are at being able to stabilize their body. So we need to be doing those bend and lift movement screens, finding out how is their body balanced. Are they prepared for these? So it's more than just doing a basic sit and reach and a basic body fat analysis. We need to really be doing a full proper screen, including movement screens as well as those basic assessments. Now that we're coming through these, we need to be obtaining medical clearance if there's anything that signifies. Going back to our risk stratification, some of these are going to be some high intensity movements. So we need to make sure that are we okay with having our clients work at this intensity, and are they going to need to be able to be screened from their doctor first? Many of these greater exercises require a larger level of focus to perfect the technique. So we need to start from the bottom. Not every client is going to be ready to jump into these exercises right away. If that's the case, then we need to be teaching these from the ground up, building up to these proper progressions. Always remember to plan for a great warm-up. Think back to those dynamic warm-ups that we have. If you've taken one of the exercise, etc. classes before and gone through those dynamic warm-ups, these dynamic warm-ups are meant to slowly raise core temperature between 1 to 2 degrees and really starts to focus on having our clients work with movement preps. So we're doing things such as our arm and leg pendulums. We're really doing the movement prep instead of just warming up on a treadmill. We're preparing our joints for these exercises. So making sure that this good warm-up, including that dynamic warm-up, is really, really beneficial. Remember, as a personal trainer, our cues are critical. We have to make sure that we can explain these properly in order to have our clients get the greatest benefit. In order for that to happen, we have to make sure that our communication is right on point with what our clients need. So remember, as the trainer, our cues are really, really critical. We also need to follow our proper progressions. Keep in mind, we may want to start with just the good exercises in order to make sure that our clients are prepared, that they can stabilize their shoulder before moving on to these great exercises. And that goes with making sure that our clients have a solid foundation. Our first one here is our good to great. Our good is our flat bench press, and our great is our standing decline press. So our good flat bench press, really focusing on the pectoralis muscles here. There's a lot of different variations that we can do with this good exercise. Remember, this may be our first progression. This may be our first stop. Keep in mind that there's a number of different ways that you can work this good exercise of the flat bench press. In addition to just doing your standard press, keep in mind that you can modify things such as tempo, as your speed, in order to be able to focus on either the concentric or the eccentric portion of this exercise. So if you have a client Maybe they're not quite ready for this standing decline press, but they still are getting a sticking point and they cannot move past a certain bench press. Maybe start to work with their tempo a little bit to focus more on the negative so that they are focusing more on 4 seconds to lower, 2 seconds to lift, 4 seconds to lower, 2 seconds to lift. That way they're still doing the exercise completely on their own, but now they're working on much more of that eccentric focus. If they're still at a plateau and they cannot increase their bench press anymore, then maybe go straight to an eccentric workout, which means they're just working the negatives. So once they unrack that weight, the weight is more than they can actually lift, so all they're going to do is resist it as it slowly lowers down, and then the trainer or spot assists the lift off. That way they're not pressing the full amount of weight, they're just working on that negative. And it may require more than spotter in order to accomplish this exercise of flat bench. Now if they're ready for it, then move on to that great exercise, which is the standing decline press. And you see here, Mike is utilizing a monster band, which is going to be your best option for the standing decline press is the thick monster band or that green. Now here's how we set this exercise up. Notice that Mike has a staggered stance and he has one leg in front and one leg behind. With that, his abdominals are engaged, his body is in an upright position, and he is going to bring those arms up and bend at the elbows, bringing those arms up. Keep in mind that the elbows should not extend past the shoulders, though. They should be in line and level. And as he exhales, he's going to press down into the picture you see on the right. And that is his finishing position. And then he's slowly going to return back to the start. Remember, those elbows should not be above the shoulders, especially if you have anyone with any shoulder impingements. So as we move through this exercise with this monster band, start out with a lighter monster band. Maybe start out with the red or the blue option, depending upon your client. It's attached to a Smith machine, a nice high attachment, and it needs to be if they're standing at about the level of their head. So if Mike were to stand up straight, that monster band attachment would be right there at about the level of his ear. In order to make sure that this is the correct angle, that's what you want to focus on as you move through this decline press. Remember, go back to basics. Make sure every client that you are working with has their belt built. Their feet are engaged, they're gripping the floor, their rib cage is locked to their hip bone, but they're not bent forward, they're still upright. Their pelvic floor is engaged, their abdominals are engaged, and that's how they're going to start each and every rep of this exercise with that belt engaged and ready and prepared. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at why. Why is this so great? First of all, it's a more effective pectoral fiber recruitment for a number of reasons. Because you're having to really work against that band. So it's a more effective movement. Also because you have a greater range of motion because your back is not held in place by that bench. Also, there's more core involvement. Because if you notice on that slide before, Mike is having to keep his body upright. He's having to resist the urge of that band that wants to pull him back in that hyperextension as he brings those arms up. So it's a much larger core recruitment and core involvement. It's a decreased risk of shoulder injury because you're working against that band. All you need to do is just drop those elbows down a little bit so that they're not above the line of that shoulder in order to make sure that you press down. Whereas with the decline, if you're using either a dumbbell or maybe using the barbell, then sometimes you're going to be pushing that shoulder and maybe not as safe as a position. So this is something that is really important as you're moving through and starting to look through these different options, is really keeping all of these different areas as safe as possible. Now here's our next one, and this one is one of my favorites. the med ball push away. The first good exercise is the push-up. And that push-up is something that is really, really important. To be honest with you, you want your clients to be able to do full push-ups in order to really get the benefit of this. If they can do full push-ups, which means their knees are not dropped down, then that is going to be a sign that says that they are prepared to move up to this med ball push away. Now here's how you can set this up. That med ball is a small weight, so it's a smaller ball. In addition to getting the benefit of doing the staggered, because one hand will be raised and one hand will be on the ground push-up, then you're also going to be getting the benefit of really engaging the serratus anterior in utilizing this position as well. So you would start, you would put, this hand would be to begin this position, both hands would be in contact with something. So one hand would be in contact with the medicine ball, and this hand right here would be in contact with the floor. You would slowly lower down until your arms reach the proper bend, the 90-degree bend, at least a 90-degree bend. And then when you're ready, you're going to exhale and press the body up. As you press the body up, these shoulders stay nice and packed and locked. And you're going to press up. All of the weight is going to go all the way up as you press through this right hand, elevating the body. Now here's what's really important about this exercise. It is important and imperative that you make sure that they maintain that level position with the shoulders. If you notice, Mike's shoulders are still level. He's not cheating one shoulder up to try to raise the body up, or he's not letting one shoulder sag down because his body can't stabilize it. If your client is pressing up and one shoulder is dropped down or one shoulder is opening up to the side, then they are not ready for this exercise yet. In order to make sure that they are prepared for it, take them back to the regular push-up and have them work through the push-up with a plus, which means they go down, both hands are on the ground, lower down to a push-up position, pressing all the way up to the top, and then press all the way through that push-up. That way it allows their scapulas to kind of drift around and really activate that serratus anterior. And then slowly bring it back down so that your scapulas are in that retracted position. Slowly lower down to your push-up, press all the way up, and then press through those scapulas, bringing those scapulas into that protracted position then. And then take it back to the retracted position, lower down, and extend all the way up. And that's a great way to prepare them for this med ball push away if they are not quite ready. So keep in mind, as they're pressing up to this position right here, the hardest part is to finish this off and to slowly lower back down to the floor. So keep in mind, if they cannot keep these shoulders level right here and keep this body in a straight line, that they are not going to be ready for this med ball push away. So one more time, quick review. Both hands start in contact with something. So one hand starts in contact with a med ball or maybe a Pilates ball, so it's a little bit smaller. Lower down, all the way down to the lowest push-up position. As they exhale and start to press up, they're going to extend all the way up. And then after their hand on the ground extends, then the hand that's on the med ball is going to push all the way through, elevating that lower arm down, maintaining this level position right here that you see in the picture on the right, and then slowly lowering down to begin the exercise again. Now, why is this one great? And this gives you the pictures right here from the beginning through the middle and all the way back to the start position right here. There is a tremendous need for core and scapulothoracic stability in this, because this scapulothoracic ability is what is keeping this shoulder nice and packed and is keeping this shoulder level with the right arm. There's a higher activation of the serratus anterior, which is why if your clients cannot perform this, take them back to the standard push-up and just have them work through that standard push-up with the plus to really work on activating that serratus anterior. This will also help to expose our unilateral weaknesses. By exposing these unilateral weaknesses, you'll see which side is not able to push all the way through this, or which side is a little weaker. So it will give you knowing where you need to start, or where you need to maybe pick up the training with your different clients. as you go through these, there's a couple of different options that you have with your clients. Remember, one hand's on a ball, one hand's on a floor, and that ball can either be a Pilates ball, the smaller balls that are filled with sand, or a medicine ball like what you see Mike using in this picture. So keep in mind, whatever is best for your clients, that's where we want to focus on, moving all the way through these different exercises. Checking out our next option, our next good to great exercise is going to be our Spider-Man push-up. Now still our good option is a push-up. This is a precursor exercise, and we're going to give you a couple of different options of utilizing the Spider-Man push-up. Now what you see here is you are going to have, in order to perform the Spider-Man push-up, each foot will be on a disc. So because each foot is on a disc, our hands are going to be flat down. As we slowly lower, our right leg is going to come up, bringing our right knee up to our right elbow. And as we press up, then our leg is going to return to start. So our start and finish position is going to be in that full push-up position. As you start to lower down for the second rep, then our left knee comes up. As our left knee comes up, it meets when we're in our lowest position. As we extend and press back, our left knee returns back to the push-up position so that we end in that high plank position. Now there's a number of different ways that you can do this. You can start with just the right foot on a disc and our left foot on the ground. That gives a little bit more stability for your client. So after the push-up, the next progression is to keep the left foot on the ground and only the right foot on a disc. Perform 8 to 12 reps, and then switch the disc over to the left foot, performing 8 to 12 reps. That way they have 3 points of contact at all times that are really stable. Then if we're ready and we think they're ready and they're prepared and stabilized, this is another option that you see, is a picture that Mike is showing you on the right. What he's done right here is now his right foot is on a gliding disc as well as his left hand. So as he slowly lowers down, his right knee comes up as his left arm extends out. And as he presses back to the beginning, he brings everything back in line as he presses up to that high plank position. And this part right here is you're beginning to look for. This is your most advanced option. That option on the right that you're looking at is the most advanced option. So as we're starting to look at this really adds a variety to a classical movement. And think about all of the different stability that's coming into play on here. We have shoulder stability, we have core stability. This is going to be a huge core exercise. And so we want to make sure that what we're doing is really, really in line with our client's goals. Not everybody is going to be able to do this because of this core and shoulder stability that it's going to be needed. So in addition to really focusing on enhancing that anti-rotational stability of the core and adding a higher degree, this is really going to give your clients a great challenge. Now, if you want to, if they are ready for a challenge, but maybe they're not ready for that opposition movement, perhaps try to use a monster band. So put a monster band around their back, their hands are on each. That way, as they lower down, that monster band will provide resistance as they press up to that push-up. So here, we'll do a quick review about what some of the progressions are. For this, we'll be utilizing just a basic push-up. First progression right there. Second progression is going to be having them put just one foot on a gliding disc so that both hands and their other foot is on a stable surface. So just the right foot moves as they come up for that Spider-Man push-up. Just the right foot moves as they come in for that Spider-Man push-up. They would do 8 to 12 reps on the right, switch the gliding disc over to the left foot, and then perform 8 to 12 reps with that left leg coming up for that Spider-Man push-up. That's our next progression. Our next step after that would be to utilize a monster band. So they still only have one foot on a gliding disc. Their other foot is maintained contact with the floor on that stable surface. The monster band is looped over their back. Their hands are around the open ends. So that way as they press up, that monster band is providing additional resistance on that press up, in addition to that Spider-Man leg coming up and down. From there, then we put both feet on a gliding disc. No monster band this time, just both feet on a gliding disc, and they move in alternating. So the first rep, the right leg comes in as a Spider-Man press up, and then they press back to high plank. Rep 2, the left leg comes in for Spider-Man push-up, press back to high plank. Rep 3 goes back to right, press up to high plank. Rep 4 goes left, press up to high plank, all the way through for 8 to 12 reps. Our next progression is both feet on a gliding disc with a monster band wrapped around their back. Their hands are securing that monster band at the floor so that with every press up, then they are having some resistance on that push-up. And then our final progression is the picture that you see right here with Mike performing, which is both feet on a gliding disc and one hand on a gliding disc so that they're able to move in opposition there. So these are a lot of options that really take a spin on a classic movement. Focusing on that anti-rotational stability of the core, keep in mind you want to make sure that your clients can maintain this position. You'll notice that Mike's hips as well as his shoulders are still in alignment. You can't really see my green line right here, but you'll notice that his hips and his shoulders are still in alignment. So there's not a lot of cheating up or down or having to do any sort of shifting. So if your clients are having to shift very much, then you'll want to make sure that you take that back a notch, because we want to focus and make sure that we're really able to maintain that proper alignment as we go through these different progressions. Now let's take a look at our next exercise. The inverted body row is one of my favorites. Now the good exercise of this is the lat pull down, and our great option is the inverted row. Now there's a couple of different things that we'll want to look at with this, different ways that you can perform this inverted row. Now what Mike is showing you, this is our easy progression. That's a very high position of the bar, so it's going to be a little bit easier because those feet are going to be supporting more of the weight. If you wanted to make this harder, you would drop that bar lower so that they are holding more of their weight in their body as they're hanging down and they are rowing up. So keep in mind, the higher the bar, the easier the row. The lower the bar, so for instance, if we were to take this bar and to loop it in, get back to my pointer too, to loop it in down here at the lower position, we would move his feet out, and it would make it a much harder, much more difficult exercise. So a good start is that lat pull down. We'll talk through some of these different options that we want to talk about with the lat pull down in order to prepare our clients for this inverted body row. With the lat pull down, as they are bringing those shoulders down and those arms down, we want to make sure that they're able to really engage that scapula. So as they're bringing those lats down and they're engaging the lats, bringing those shoulder blades back, make sure that their elbows are in the proper position. So how do you know if their elbows and their body is in a proper position? You can look and see where this bar hits. You'll notice where these elbows are pointing, they need to be pointing down at the floor, slightly back, in order for that bar to hit right there at that top of the chest position. Whenever they're able to do that, they're going to return back to the starting position and then come in for their second set. Focus on utilizing the lats to really engage. I give my clients the cue in order to make sure that they've engaged those lats to squeeze, that if I were to tickle you or to squeeze your lat, how would you make it tight? Make it nice and hard, that way I couldn't tickle you. And that is that engagement of that lat. They want to make sure that they're moving through this the entire time and moving through this exercise, keeping those lats nice and engaged. Then when we move to this inverted body row and they have that great engagement with the lat, we can start to talk about how that correlates with the scapula. When they start in this position and they're from the hang on an inverted row, the first thing that they're going to start with is their Smith machine or their TRX or their monster band. Their arms are going to be straight and their body is going to be hanging and supported solely by what they're holding on to. As they begin to row, the first thing they need to do is engage the scapula. So they bring that scapula back, pulling those scapulas back so that scapula starts to hug the spine, almost like you're trying to hold a pencil between the shoulder blades, and then moving through with the elbows. After that scapula is engaged, the elbows bend and come back nice and tight, nice and close to the body, bringing that bar up to this midsection of the chest right here. When they start to lower and slowly come out, the negative of this exercise is probably part of the best. So if you can have your client focusing on the negative of this exercise and slowly lower, make sure that lower is as slow as possible, all the way back to the dag hang, to make sure that they're focusing on the negative. A lot of clients have a tendency to row up and then they just kind of release as quick as possible. But making sure you talk to them about tempo is very, very important. Now here's kind of why it's great. More effective for the lat because there's much more movement. There's much more movement from the scapula all the way through. There's a lot of major core activation going on in order to maintain that position. Take a minute right here and to look at how straight of a line Mike's body is in. So that's a lot of core activation. Whenever we start to look at this, we want to look at the functional movement with minimal shoulder stress. So this is a rowing motion. This is a pulling motion. And that's what a very functional movement is, but there's not as much problem with the shoulder. Think about if we do a bent over row, that hang position that is just pulling that shoulder back. So if someone is not properly progressed and they don't know how to pack that shoulder, that's a lot of stress. So what we need right here is to make sure that we have the minimal stress on the shoulder as possible. Like I said, we're a very forward society. So clients need these horizontal pulling exercises to help their back pull their body up and their shoulders upright. One thing that I encourage everyone to do, remember in the very beginning we talked about proper progression and to look at proper screening. Make sure you do that postural analysis for your clients. So look at their posture. How are they standing? Where are their shoulders? Are their shoulders hunched forward because they sit all day, they look at a computer screen? Or are their shoulders nice and tall, rolled back so that their chest is open? All of these rowing exercises like this, these horizontal pulling exercises, are going to help strengthen the back. And that's going to open up the shoulders, open up the chest. So that way our clients can stand with this really tall, upright posture position. I always laugh whenever clients come to me and ask how they can get a flatter stomach. And I say, well, the easiest thing is to stand up straight. Because if you stand up straight, rolling those shoulders back, it elongates that midsection, which does help to pull the stomach in. So these exercises, these horizontal pulling exercises, are going to help our clients pull those shoulders back, stand upright, and make sure that they are in a very anatomical correct position. Now this is one of the best exercises ever because it works with a number of different lines of pull. So good exercise is a dumbbell row, which is what Chris is showing us here on the left-hand side. This is just your basic dumbbell row position. It's a great precursor to starting out this row with hip extension. Now as we look through this and we start to check all of these different exercises out, we're going through, remember, this dumbbell row, these upright rows, horizontal rows, these are great precursors for this. But now what we want to do is to make extra joints be involved. Remember we talked about what makes a good exercise great? Is going to be able to utilizing multi-joints and also utilizing multi-muscle groups. This bent over row or a dumbbell row that you see on the left side is really just utilizing flexion and extension of the shoulder and of the elbow. But this row with hip extension is utilizing not only flexion and extension of the shoulder, but also at the hips. So I'm going to go forward one slide so that you can see the beginning and the ending picture so that you understand exactly how this is attached. So there's a couple of different things that you can do with this. On our starting position, which is our top picture right here, our monster band is attached below and at the floor. So this is your start position. There should be enough tension right here that he is holding with his hands so that the band is tight and nice and taut, but it's not pulled or stretched just yet. Because as we stand up, that's when we're going to stretch. So we want this band to be nice and tight, but there doesn't need to be a lot of stretch to it. The same thing with this band that is attached at the hip region. This is attached back here. I don't know if you can really see very well in the second picture. This is attached back here to a Smith machine, and the bar has been lowered, so it is at hip height with your client. Once it is attached, then the client steps into the band, and they are going to keep that band nice and low around the hips. Whenever they keep that band nice and low around the hips, it wants to be crossing around that hip bone region. And that is where we want it to be. If they feel like the band is pulling them back too far, then you may want to take a step closer to that attachment point. But we want to start with enough tension in the band so that it's tight whenever it is in this beginning position that you see in this top picture, but there's not a lot of stretch. So it's tight but not stretched yet. That way, keep in mind we're going to be having pull from a number of different ways. So we don't want any one way to be overly stretched just yet because we want it to be consistent on both ends of the pull. So as you start in this position, our hands are forward, we're bent at the hips. I want you to take a look at what that back is. We have a nice flat back right here, making sure that we have that level. So as we move through and we go through, let's see if we can move this one. As we move through, we want to make sure, there we go, how to move that arrow. Make sure that that back is in that nice flat position in tabletop. As you're starting to move through and you stand up, always keep in mind the abdominals should be engaged. We still want to have that belt built and our feet are grounded in this position. Maintaining that stabilization in the spine and in the abdominal region is key for this because whenever you stand up, pushing through the hips and rowing up with those arms, then we want to make sure that in this full upright position that everything is engaged, because if not, it's going to be very easy to hyperextend with the back. So make sure that you maintain that core stabilization. This is a multi-joint exercise with resistance in the opposing directions. It really focuses on strengthening both the lower body and the upper body, both with our pull muscles. So remember, we have exercises that are both push and pull. This is focusing on the pull muscles for both upper body and the lower body. The band is going to allow you to increase the speed of the exercise without having to increase the risk of injury. So keep in mind your progressions for these, they can start with just one option. So perhaps for a beginning progression, just utilize this first band. Do 8 to 12 reps with just this band, and then just 8 to 12 reps with just this back band, and alternating back and forth, supersetting these two exercises. Then after they build up, then possibly add both of these in right here. Keep in mind, this is done with more of a horizontal row position, so you'll notice that Mike is extending out and he's pulling up with that horizontal motion. You can also attach this band that his hands are holding onto at a lower attachment point and making it more of an upright row. That way it just kind of depends upon what your client's goals are, what all attachment points that you have for possibilities in order to be able to look at some of these different options. All right, we're going to move through for our next exercise right here. I'm going to let you guys take a look at this while I grab a quick drink. All right, so here's our next exercise, our carrying angle curl. So a good exercise is that preacher curl right here that you see on the left. Really helps with that hypertrophy of the biceps. It really does a really good job of allowing our clients to isolate the different heads. But if we want to think about functional, our preacher curls are not necessarily a really functional exercise. Now what we want to be looking at here is why is this a functional exercise? Or why versus why is the preacher curl not a functional exercise? This carrying angle curl, that's probably how you're going to be carrying heavy bags, think grocery bags, or baby carriers. All of these things, that's a very functional, real life thing that you're going to be doing. This preacher curl is the reason why it's not as functional is because think about where this support is right here. These elbows are supported, it's locked down. You're able to really lock in with those elbows and pulling in with those shoulders to keep those elbows locked down. That's not really a functional movement because if you're trying to grab a bag of groceries and maybe lift it up and put it over your shoulder, there's no way that your elbow is going to be supported. And if you have to support it against the body, then the only way to get the bag of groceries over your shoulder or maybe to put a backpack on is to externally rotate with that elbow against the arm and against the hip. And that's going to put the shoulder joint in a little bit of an unsafe position. So that's the reason why this preacher curl is not functional. If you are having to pick something up and swing it over your shoulder, or even to just pick up a bag of groceries or a baby carrier, that elbow is probably not going to be supported against anything. So while this preacher curl is a great precursor exercise for the carrying angle curl, it's not as functional because your body's not going to have that support against the elbow. So when we're starting to look at this carrying angle curl, it shows your body how to utilize your body as an anchor point, both with the upper part of the tricep and also how to utilize your movement at the wrist in order to be able to support your body and pick something up. So in this preacher curl position, you'll notice very straight wrist, whereas in this carrying angle curl, we have a little bit more of a bend. So what we've done is we are going to keep the tricep nice and tight against that body. There's a little space between the elbow and the body. So what is really tight and what is locked down is that shoulder and that upper portion of the arm. So that's the part that is supported. Notice that's the part in this preacher curl that's unsupported. What's supported is the elbow, the lower compartment of the arm, and this part right here between the tricep is what's unsupported. So this is what we're trying to make sure is supported in the carrying angle curl. So we've got our hand is a little bit of an external rotation in order to hold that band. We have a grip, so our palms are facing up. The upper arm is locked into the body, and we're in a staggered stance. Think about going back to basics, building your belt. You want to make sure that your feet are nice and grounded. Even though you're in your staggered stance, our feet are nice and grounded. And also, what you want to make sure is that your abdominals are engaged. That's really making sure that your body stays in that upright position. So then, once we've built our belt, abdominals engage, then that's whenever we can start to do our curl. Slowly lowering down to the beginning position. So in our beginning position, see if we have one. Nope, we don't. Back up one side. So in our beginning position, our arms would be extended, small external rotation of the hands, our upper arm, our upper tricep region, and our shoulders are nice and packed, locked against our body. We're going to just curl up to the position you see right here. Performing 8 to 12 reps, and then we want to switch which leg is in the lead. So if our right leg is in the lead for the first set, our left leg needs to be in the lead for the second set. and then alternating so that we make sure that our clients are doing a balanced program. Now, if we look through this, why is this a great exercise? The reason that it's so great, and the reason that it's so much better than just a standard preacher curl, is because it gives us a more effective contraction of the long and short head of the bicep. It minimizes the risk for rupturing the short head, and it's also very functional. If you think about your arm, you think about how your arm actually works as a fulcrum, as a lever, then what we want to make sure is we want to really minimize the amount of flexion of the wrist. So if we're going to back up one slide right here, you'll notice that this wrist is much more of a neutral or a natural position. This is how your wrist naturally goes. If you were to flex that hand towards you, so flexion of the wrist so that those hands and knuckles roll over forward towards your face from this position, that's what puts our bicep at risk of being ruptured. So you want to make sure that that wrist stays in this position right here. That's the problem with a preacher curl, is that it's very easy to curl those wrists towards your face. And if you curl that wrist towards your face so that those knuckles kind of start to roll over and you're looking at more of your knuckles as opposed to your fingers in this position, that puts the head of the bicep at a risk of being ruptured. So that's why this lowers and minimizes that risk of rupturing the short head, because it keeps that risk in that opposite position. All right, let's move forward for our next. Now we're going to start looking at a little bit more of our lower body exercises. Our first good exercise is the squat. Now there is no denying that the squat is one of the best lower body and actually kind of total body exercises out there. But what we want to look at is how can we make it even better? And that answer is going to be our box squat. We start to look at our box squat. The reason why that this one is so good and the reason why this is so important is going to be because what this does is it reduces the force on the knee. Now, whenever you do a standard squat or a front squat or any of our squat options, generally speaking, this lower compartment of the leg or the tibia of the leg is going to be at a larger angle. So it's going to have to move forward in order to match the angle, see if I can get my lines here, match the angle of the spine with that front part of the leg. Because in order to perform a correct squat, we want the line of our spine to be parallel with the line of our tibia. And that's part of our movement screens on the bend and lift movement screens. So if we're looking at all of those options and we're looking at those different angles, what the box squat does is it allows the lower leg to stay a little bit more vertical. And that is what reduces the shearing force on the knee. So what you want to do, in talking through this box squat position, what you want to do is basically you want to lower down, all the way down, and find the correct height. You'll notice that this is the height for Mike, and the reason you can see is because this is where we are at parallel. So it allows your body to go parallel or even slightly below in a very safe manner. So we have to find either a box, a bench, a step, something like that that gives us the correct option and the correct line for that parallel level. So whenever you lower down and your client comes to rest on that box, there should be all of that weight should come down. Now, when I say that all of the weight should come down, don't allow them to rest or roll the shoulders forward. They need to maintain this upright position. So they have to maintain that body in that full upright position right here. They're still engaged, and whenever they're ready, they're going to stand up. And as they stand up, keep in mind that this is going to be a much more concentrically loaded exercise than the standard squat. Because generally the standard squat the concentric part of the exercise, or the rise of the exercise, is usually pretty fast. Most people focus on a squat with lowering down slower and then standing up slightly faster. Because you are starting a box squat from a completely relaxed position right here, and whenever you stand up, this is a much more concentric loaded than a standard squat. So keep in mind, there's probably going to be a little bit more post-workout fatigue from this box squat than there would be with your standard squat. Your standard squat is going to feel it much more from the negative, so you may get your delayed onset muscle soreness 24 to 48 hours after. Whereas this box squat, you're going to feel a lot more of fatigue is going to be happening right then because of that concentric load. So, quick review on the box squat. Standing upright, our heels are going to be very close to our box or our bench, the very edge of our bench. We're going to slowly lower down, focusing on that deceleration. Whenever the glutes touch, they release all of the weight down, maintaining the upright posture though, never allowing the body to relax or to come forward, maintaining that upright posture. Abs are engaged, and then they begin to rise. The feet are nice and grounded, pressing through the heels, driving the body all the way up into a very concentric, focused squat. Now the reasons why this one's great, and you can see the beginning and the end right here, it allows for a deeper knee flexion. And it's safer because of the way of the angle of the leg. Because that lower leg is able to stay more vertical than in a traditional squat, then it allows for that safer knee flexion. It utilizes a lot more quad work because they are having to rise up. They're having to start up on the beginning of this exercise. Whenever they are having to start from that seated position, that's going to take a lot more quad work because of the concentric focus. Higher degree of core activation because their body has to maintain this core, this very engaged position to maintain this upright posture. The reason why I like this so much is it removes all momentum from this exercise. If you've ever seen someone do a full range of motion squat, then sometimes they lower down and they bounce. Whenever they get as low as they can, they do a small bounce in order to get them past that sticking point. So this really removes all momentum. So it's going to give a much more fatiguing workout of both the quads and the glutes. Now this exercise is very functional because if you think about it, think about all of your different clients right now. If you have any older adults or any older clients that you're working with, this is an exercise that is going to be wonderful. Because think about all of the different daily activities that your clients are going to move through that require them to go from a sit to stand position. Everything from toileting to just resting to sitting down, these are very functional movements. So this is something that is going to be a great exercise for everybody that you work with. This can be something that you utilize even with no weight, no bar, no band, absolutely no resistance with all of your different clients because this is a truly functional movement. Still sticking with the lower body, this right here is one of my all-time favorites. All of the lower body exercises tend to be my favorite, but this is one that I absolutely love. Now going from your basic squat, which our model is demonstrating on the left, to a suspender squat. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go forward one slide so that you can see how to step into these suspenders. You have two monster bands, and you are going to step with your left leg on one monster band and your right leg on another monster band. Now you can have your client do this one of two ways. You can have them sit in a chair, step on each monster band, and then loop it over their head. Or if they're able, have them step on a monster band with each foot and then squat all the way down to the floor. Loop the monster band over their head to their opposite shoulder, and then take the other one and loop it over their head to the opposite shoulder so that you see it makes this nice suspender or X position in the back. Now in order to get them started, the first couple of times they do these exercises, I'm going to back up one slide real quick. You may want to have them hold a medicine ball. just do something to kind of counterbalance their weight so that they know where to put their hands. After they begin to become accustomed to this, then you can have them do a couple of other variations, maybe with their hands up on their head in a prisoner squat position, or maybe with their hands on their hips, like Mike is showing in that top picture. Now, why this is really great is because the bands, these monster bands, the resistance from the band runs in line with the pull of the gluteus maximus. So this increases the demands for deceleration during the squat. So as we're looking through these and we're starting to go through these different options, that's something that's really, really important, is teaching people how to decelerate. If your clients are having a problem with maybe lunges or with any plyometric style of exercises, it's probably because of the deceleration. They may not know how to decelerate their body. Now, how will you know if your client has a problem with deceleration? Think about whenever they jump. If someone jumps and they're landing really loud, then they're probably not decelerating properly, which means they're not absorbing the weight coming down through the ball of the foot all the way through the heel, all the way through the bend of the knee. This suspender squat will increase the demand for the deceleration because that band is going to want to pull them down. It's going to want to pull all the way down because when they're standing, that's when that band is the most engaged. So when they slowly lower, that band is going to want to really pull them down fast. So in order to resist that and focus on their tempo, this is really going to give them a great way to focus on that deceleration. So this is a great precursor exercise before you do anything like squats or any plyometrics for any of your clients. As opposed to having to do a front squat or a back squat, your hands are free versus traditional squatting techniques. So you can add additional resistance if you would like by either adding in a kettlebell, a medicine ball, or just using that with the combined elastic resistance of that monster band. Moving forward into our next exercise, now let's take a couple minutes to break down these Bulgarian squats, just in general, and then we'll talk about moving into our overhead Bulgarian squat. Now, just your basic Bulgarian squat is a wonderful, wonderful exercise, and there's a couple of different reasons why. And we're going to talk about the setup of a Bulgarian squat first, and then how to move it through into that overhead Bulgarian squat. Now, your Bulgarian squat really focuses any single leg movement, actually, not just the Bulgarian squat, even your single leg deadlift, really is going to focus on being able to find the weaknesses of the body. So where is those unbalanced issues coming in? So by utilizing this one leg motion with the other leg elevated up, we're going to really be able to identify where those imbalances in the bodies lie. All of our single leg movements really increase our muscular proprioception of the body. With this, if you think about a single leg motion, we're really going to have to focus on grounding that foot, on making sure that that foot is grounded so that it can really hold all of our weight. And thinking back to building your belt, how you ground that foot is you extend all of the toes out so that each toe has its own space in the shoe. When your toes are nice and spread, set them down so that each toe has its own space and can grip the floor. After you've gripped the floor, make sure that you extend the weight back so that it's evenly distributed and the weight is back in the heel. As we're going through that and we're looking through these different options with that foot nice and engaged, now you want to make sure that you engage the core. So keep in mind you want to lock the lower rib to the top of the hip. You cannot crunch forward or bend forward though. So you just want to engage those abdominal regions, so lock that rib to that hip bone, and then draw in the pelvic floor. This is really important that you build the belt for this exercise because your body's going to have a tendency to want to lean forward, to lean over that knee. So by building that belt and leaning forward, then and building that belt will keep your body from leaning forward. So we want to make sure that we maintain that very upright position. Now I'm going to utilize the picture on the right, but ignore the band for just a minute. Whenever you're setting up a Bulgarian squat, the number one error that most people make is they put the box or the bench too far away from them. So how do you know if the box is in a proper position? One, you want to look at the line from the shoulders down to this knee. As you look through this line, oh, I can't draw it all of a sudden, you want to make sure that there is a straight line. There we go. There it goes. You want to make sure that there is a straight line from the shoulder all the way down to the knee. If there is any curvature of the low back, so maybe if there's any arching of the low back, you know that box is either too far back or the box is too high. So that's the easy way you want to make sure that they are able to maintain that straight position. Also, what I want you to keep in mind is to look at the line. Look at the line of the legs, the upper compartment of both legs. You'll notice going just from the hip to this knee is relatively close. Actually, you'll be able to see it better in this picture right here. Going from this picture on the left, the hip down to the knee, is really close to being parallel with this front leg right here. So that's what we want to be focusing on. We want to try to get as close to this parallel angle as we can whenever we're moving through these different exercises with this Bulgarian squat, both with the arms down and with the arms overhead. So that's how we want to focus to know if we're in the correct position. These are what we want to be looking at. Now, as far as how far to lower down will really depend upon the person. This picture on the left, you'll notice that he isn't as far down as Mike is in the picture on the right. Ideally, we would like to lower down until our knee is close to but not touching the floor, or our thigh right here is parallel with the ground. Keep in mind that's very advanced. You may not have your clients be able to go down that far. So if you need to have them modify to just this distance on the picture on the left right here to this angle of the knee, then that's fine. That's absolutely, think about your clients, whatever's best for them. But this is what we want to focus on. Upright posture, just a quick review. Upright posture, so a straight line from the shoulders down to this bent knee. We want to make sure there is no curvature of the low back. If there's any curvature of the low back, then their heel is either too far lifted, or maybe the bench is too far back. So monitor and adjust. We want to ideally lower down to parallel, but especially with these single leg movements, it may take a while. It may take a while to get to be able to get them to lower that far down, especially with these single leg movements, because their balance may not quite be there. Now let's kind of look through about moving into our overhead Bulgarian squat. I'm going to remove some of our lines on here. There we go. Now we understand how to set up for the standard Bulgarian squat. Let's look at setting up for the overhead Bulgarian squat. I recommend utilizing a monster band because it's easier for them to come in and out of the position. If you do an overhead Bulgarian squat with a barbell or a straight bar, that's a lot of weight overhead. And if they need to either dump the weight or come out of that position, that's a lot of variables. So I recommend always utilizing a monster band for this overhead Bulgarian squat. You'll notice that the line, it goes underneath the mid of the foot, and it comes all the way up and loops through the hands. You'll notice that Mike is holding that with our arms wide in the Y position. Now with our arms up and in that Y position, so if those arms are up in that wide position, we have to talk about how we pack our shoulder in order to maintain our shoulder positions for this overhead squat. In this packed position with our arms in the Y, what I want you to think about doing is go ahead and put your arms up and overhead in this Y position. Now I want you to reach up and extend those arms up so that those shoulders come up close to the ears. So this is in your up position. To pack it, I want you to lower down, engage that lat. So whenever we engage that lat, I want you to flex that lat as hard as you can. That is going to lower that shoulder down and to help pack that shoulder in that position. With that up position, our lat is engaged. I also want you to think about engaging the shoulder blades, the scapulas. So with our lat engaged, I also want you to think about holding a pencil between those shoulder blades. So you're thinking about pulling those shoulder blades back and engaging the lat. With our arms in that Y position, that is the safe position with our arms overhead. Now, if you have anyone with any shoulder impingement issues, then this is something that you may want to be aware of. If anyone has any shoulder impingement, then they're not going to be able to do this overhead Bulgarian squat. So really focus, really look through your health history packets, make sure we don't have any impingements. And what we want to make sure is that our shoulders are engaged, our lat is engaged, and our shoulder is packed whenever we're utilizing this monster band. And I always recommend going with a monster band instead of any straight bar or barbell weight in case they need to come out of that. Since this is a single leg movement, it is going to require a whole lot more of balance. So if we have any balance issues, this is something that we'll want to be aware of, depending upon whether or not your client is prepared for this option. Now here's why it's great. As with any single leg movement, our single leg squats and single leg movement varieties always improve the proprioception of the muscles and of the body. So proprioception is your body's awareness of movement. With this single leg, if you think about it, if you stand on one leg, if you get the slightest bit off balance, you're going to feel it. Your body's going to sway, and you're probably going to have to put your other leg down. But if you're standing on 2 feet and somebody taps you, you probably don't notice it as well or as much. But if you're on 1 foot and someone taps you, knocks you or tries to knock you over, you're going to feel it much more difficult to stay upright. So all of these single leg movements really increase that proprioception of the body. It also increases the activation of the knee stabilizers because we're having to focus on a very slow movement, on lowering all the way down. With this increased activation of the knee stabilizers, this is really helping your body build the strength to support itself for other exercises, perhaps like plyometrics. So by increasing the activation of the knee stabilizers, that's also going to increase the strength of our decelerators in the knee. It enhances gluteal activation, as well as lowers lumbar compressive forces when weight is added. The overhead position increases core and shoulder stability. Remember we talked about whenever we were talking about just our standard Bulgarian squat, we really have to make sure that they are able to ground their feet, maintain that upright posture before they go into that position, because you really want to ensure that your clients do not bend at the waist forward, that they maintain that straight position. So that really increases the core stability needed. Now looking at our exercise number 10. Now these are going to be taking all of our lunge movements and really seeing how we can increase them and make them, we really want to see how we can increase them and make them much more efficient for our higher level of exercisers. So our good exercise is the walking lunge. Our great exercise is the sliding kettlebell lunge. Now the reason why this is good is because we're going to use this in a unilateral sense. So we are only going to load one side of the body. So if we are only loading one side of the body, notice that Mike has that kettlebell in his right hand. If we are only loading that one side of the body, then we have to make sure that our body can maintain the stability to keep our shoulders and our hips level without cheating one side up or one side down. So this is why this is so important, because this is a truly functional movement. If you think about your movements in your daily life, how many times do you go through activities of life and only carry things on one side? It happens all the time. Think about women carrying purses or people carrying children or babies. Rarely do you have two babies, one on each hip. Well, if you do, you have twins. Congratulations, because you're probably one of the most exhausted people in the world. But if you have a child, a young child, you probably are going to carry it on one hip the majority of the time. So this is a great way to really combat those times and those activities to make sure that we're focused back on this unilateral sense. So we're going to set up this sliding kettlebell lunge. We're going to weight only our right side. We're going to put our right foot on a gliding disc, and our left foot is going to be on the ground nice and stable. What we're going to do is we are going to slowly slide that leg back into a lunge position. Both knees are going to be bending at the same time. Very similar to the setup of what we're talking about with the Bulgarian squat. Notice the lower from the hip down to the knee, see if I can get my line to work, from the hip down to the knee is pretty close to parallel with this front leg right here, from the knee down to the ankle. So the lower compartment of the lead leg is level with the upper compartment of the back leg. So as we slowly lower down, really focusing on those decelerations, maintaining level at the hips. So do not let one hip focus or cheat out or cheat up. And then pressing all the way up, as high up as we can get. Pressing all the way up, coming back to that standing position. And then slowly sliding back down. Remember, our weight is only on the right side. We're going to continue moving through these reps from 8 to 12 times. And then we're going to switch. The kettlebell will go to the opposite side. And our gliding disc will move to our opposite leg. And we'll repeat the same thing for 8 to 12 reps. Now I want you to focus through on this and to think about a couple of different things. One is posture. It is human nature to try to counterbalance. So as that leg slides back, people are really going to try to cheat forward with these shoulders and to cheat forward and lean forward over that leg. So make sure that when you're working with your clients, that's one of the things you're looking for. A nice, tall, upright posture, slowly extending down, and then coming right back up to a standing position. Also, you want to focus on what the line is that they're pressing that foot back. Make sure some people tend to want to do this lunge with that straight or only slightly bent knee. Notice how much of a bend is in that knee. That is a really good bend. It's not quite 90 degrees, but it's pretty close to a 90-degree bend in that back knee. So do not allow your clients to try to keep that back leg straight. As they lower down and they slowly lower down, really have them focus on keeping the knees bending at the same rate. So as their lead knee bends, so should their back knee. Please make sure that they don't try to do the sliding lunge with a straight back leg. You'd be surprised how many people really try that. And again, going back to focusing on building the belt, ensuring that core stability, that's what we really want to focus on here. So upright posture, from that shoulder all the way down to that knee, lowering down. We want to go down until that knee almost touches the floor or parallel with that front leg. And remember, both knees bend at the same rate. That way we want to make sure that we keep the body upright. Now, why is this great? Sliding exercises really increase the demand for core stability and a controlled movement. Think about how easy it is to just let that leg go down as quickly as possible and then try to come up. So it really increases the demand of core stability to keep your body upright so you don't cheat forward, and also to control the movement. The first time somebody does this, if you ask them to try to bend the knees at the same rate, they're going to look like Bambi learning how to walk for the first time. Most people are not used to utilizing their muscles in that type of way. So this is a very slow tempo exercise. So very high on the gluteal recruitment because as you're lowering down and coming up, that's pretty much all glute right there. So that's a really high gluteal recruitment. And the contralateral resistance activates the gluteus medius, which is something that is sometimes harder to really focus on, especially with some of the different exercises. So this is really going to increase the core stability as well as help to increase that deceleration and the knee stabilizers in the body. All right, still focusing on that lower body, our exercise number 11 is our weighted step-ups. So right here, what we want to be focusing on, again, our good exercise is the lunge. So the lunge of all of these exercises is going to be a precursor. The lunge is a precursor for all of these exercises. So here what we're focusing on is a weighted step-up. What we want to do is you can weight equally both sides. You'll notice right here, Mike has a dumbbell in each hand, and it looks like he has about an 8 to 10 pound dumbbell. You want to find a step, a bench, or a box that is an appropriate height. So the focus on this is for them to be able to step up with one leg. So really make sure that you're not getting too overzealous with your clients, because if their foot is up and it's higher than parallel with the ground, so maybe if their knee is above parallel, so their knee is above their hip, they may not be able to have the focus and the strength to push themselves up. So you may have to start slow on this one. And I encourage everyone to start really low and just build up. Set your clients up for success. So if we start low and they can do that height, then slowly move up. Then slowly increase from there. But don't start out too high, because the focus and the name of the game for this exercise is to do this one very slow. If they have to jump so they can't even get up on that step up themselves, then you're taking away some of that gluteal recruitment. So we want them to be able to pick a height that they are going to be able to step up on without having to give a little baby hop. So this exercise is done very slow. Like I said, start slow, start low, and let them build up. What you want to do, we're going to go to the next one because it gives you a couple of different pictures. What you want to do is to start with their foot up on the bench or a box or a step and press all the way up as slow as possible. Whenever their leg that's on the bench is fully extended, they're bringing up that opposite leg into this tabletop position that you see right here. Maybe in the beginning, if they cannot bring that leg up, that's okay. If they are not really ready to utilize those hip flexors as well, just have them leave it down and to a neutral position, which is their leg extended. As you start to lower, this is where this exercise really becomes the most beneficial, because on this one, this very slow deceleration is what is going to really increase those knee stabilizers. Do not let them step up and then just jump down. What we want them to focus on is to step up nice and slow, step up, really control that motion whenever they get to the top. Work on your clients being able to ground their feet. Then slowly come back down. Whatever tempo they step up is the tempo they should lower down on. If they step up and then just step down, you're completely wasting half of the movement. So as you have them go up, bringing that knee up and slowly lower down, this is highly functional because of the core activation. Think about how many times you step up one foot at a time, going upstairs, getting in and out of cars. Anything like that is definitely something that's going to be done one side at a time. So what we're able to do is really challenge the neuromuscular system from a total body standpoint. In order to maintain this upright position, I cannot stress the importance of going back to the basics and making sure that their abdominals are engaged. Whenever they're standing up in that step-up position with their body upright and their abdominals engaged, then this is one of the best ways to get them to really focus on their balance. In that up position before they lower back down, have them hold it for 2 to 3 seconds so that they're able to really focus on maintaining that balance. When they are up, whether their knee is bent and they're utilizing that hip flexor position or not, make sure that everything is still level. So make sure the right hip and the left hip is level. Make sure the right shoulder and the left shoulder is level. So we want to make sure that everything is in its neutral position, the anatomically neutral position. So even if their leg is up and they're focusing on that hip flexor whenever they bend that knee, we still don't want them to cheat that hip up. So make sure that that is something that is really important for them to look through. Oh, there we go. Still going with the lower body, we're moving a little bit more into lower body with a total body focus. A good exercise is a deadlift, and the deadlift is a great precursor. We're going to go through some of the different options for the deadlift real quick, just to make sure that everyone's on the same page on how to perform a deadlift. And then we'll talk about how to move that to the great option of a kettlebell swing. For a deadlift, you want your feet to be about hip width apart. Whenever we talk about hip width apart, I say that unless they're overly tall clients, you'll want them to be about inner hip width apart, which is slightly more of a distance than 2 fists put together. Now, whenever we go for a deadlift, we want our hands to be gripping the bar about 12 to 15 inches apart. Again, if your client is tall, then they may have to do a slightly wider grip. But for the average person, about 12 to 15 inches is sufficient. We're in this overhand grip right here. The reason that we recommend doing this grip as opposed to doing an alternated grip, which is one hand is over, one hand is under, is because that underhand runs the risk of putting too much tension on the bicep with that curl. And remember we talked about it on the carrying angle curl. So we would do a very neutral grip. So this hand, neutral position, is with our overhand grip. So this makes sure that our wrists are in neutral and there's no risk of injuring or hurting our bicep. What we want to do is to maintain the straight line of the back. Whenever we go through a deadlift right here, notice how she is maintained neutral from neck all the way down to tailbone. That's what is the number one problem with deadlifts, is you will see people who when they start that initial lift, their back naturally does a very small arch or a very small forward roll whenever they start to pull. And that is something that you have to make sure that they keep this neutral position all the way through, from beginning all the way to end. So we're grabbing our hands onto the bar. Our grip is 12 to 15 inches apart. We're going to come up to a standing position holding that bar. We're going to utilize this all the way neutral position, pressing through the feet, talking about grounding the feet, pressing up, the body stays in neutral, no rounding, coming up to a straight position. Now ensure that your client, whenever they're in the top position, their body should be anatomically correct. So there should be no hyperextension in the back whatsoever. Some people come up with the deadlift and they try to hyperextend thinking that they're really getting the focus on the back, but that's incorrect. The top position of the deadlift should be in neutral, anatomic neutral, so a straight line. Absolutely no hyperextension, no leaning back. Not even a little bit. Some people will, even if they lean back 5 degrees, that puts too much stress on the lumbar spine. So they should be coming up, maintaining neutral position. As they lower down, with the part of the deadlift, as they lower down, keep in mind that the difference between a deadlift and a squat is the hips are higher in a deadlift. So as they bend down, those hips go back and they slowly bend forward at the waist and then at the knee. If you look in the picture of our model on the left, our hips are higher than the knees, and our hips are higher than they would be in a squat for this position. So as we slowly lower and we slowly bend down, that bar should stay as close to the shins as possible. Lowering it down until the weight touches the ground, and then beginning your lift again, coming all the way up to that top. Again, the bar stays as close to the shins as possible. Coming up till the body is in neutral, anatomic neutral, so straight line, hips and shoulders are directly stacked and are directly stacked over the ankles. No hyperextension. As you lower down, the hips press back, and the body slowly lowers that weight down, maintaining the straight line of the spine the entire time. Remember, whenever you're working with a deadlift, as you're moving through these exercises, you should be able to set the weight down with control. If the weight is not being able to set down with control and they have to drop it, then the weight is too high. Keep in mind the only limiting factor of a deadlift is grip strength. So I encourage you to not let your client strap in, because if they are not able to hold the weight, then they shouldn't be lifting the weight. That's what we want to focus on with the deadlift. That is a great building exercise to get ready for our kettlebell swing. Now our kettlebell swing, I'm going to show you this picture right here, and then we're going to advance the slide forward. You get a couple of different options. So the picture forward, I'll reverse so you can see the beginning. The picture of Mike, this is the beginning picture. Well, this is in the middle of his swing. But notice that his back is forward. This is his start position. This is what we would call the dead hang. So if you imagine that bell, that kettlebell that he has, is just hanging straight down from his arms, so that kettlebell is coming straight from his shoulders, this is the straight position. This is where he would start. His back is straight. He is in a core neutral position. He is also in a flat back, so his spine is in a neutral position as well. And from there, he utilizes the push, and the forceful extension of the hips is what propels that kettlebell up. Now the picture on the right is what I would encourage you to keep your clients at. Utilizing from that dead hang position, knees are nice and bent, our back is straight, we're in that dead hang position. We stand up by forcefully extending the hips. There should be no movement of the arms here. You should not have to lift with the arms whatsoever. That momentum and that bell swings up because of the speed that you have extended the hips. Whenever you extend those hips up, those arms will naturally come up as well. Keep a nice loose grip on the bell. You should not have to kill that bell or hold on really tight to it. So a nice loose grip on the bell. There shouldn't be a whole lot of tension in the hands. As we extend up from the hips, I encourage you with your beginning clients to keep that at about shoulder level, and then softly bending the knees, bending at the hips, bringing that bell back down between the hands, between the legs, extending up with the hips again, and that's what brings that bell up and down. Keep in mind, the whole movement of this is going to alternate back and forth between this picture right here that you see on the right and forcefully extending the hips up and extending all the way through right here to this picture. That is how you go through with that extension. Now, as you begin to work and you understand how to utilize the hip and your clients begin to become more and more comfortable, they're able to utilize more movement and utilize more force with that hip extension in order to bring that bell all the way up in a full kettlebell swing position. Is it necessary to get that full extension to still get the benefit of a kettlebell swing? No, it is not. As long as you're bringing that kettlebell up and it comes at least shoulder height, then you know that your clients are utilizing the proper power and are getting that position correct. So if their kettlebell is not coming up even shoulder height, then that probably means that they're not properly extending their hips. They're not utilizing all the power in the lower body that they could be utilizing. So keep in mind you would be moving through this probably between 12 and 15 reps for a kettlebell swing. This is one of the greatest exercises ever because utilizing that power through the hips and that core activation to keep that body straight makes this a true total body movement. There shouldn't be any movement in the arms, so it should not be an exercise from an upright row. So there shouldn't be any shoulders or arm movements in here. It's truly a total body. If you have clients moving through these about 12 to 15 reps, or 8 to 12 if they're a beginner, then they're going to be probably a little bit winded after they go through their first couple of sets with this. Now, the reason why we want to focus on utilizing this kettlebell as opposed to a deadlift is because not only is this a total body exercise, but it's also a very cardio intensive. So you can utilize this from a couple of different standpoints. Remember, the higher the weight of the bell, the harder the exercise is, but keep in mind that weight isn't necessarily the end determining factor. If they are not able to fully extend their hips, then they are not ready to increase the weight of their bell. I start all of my clients off doing kettlebell swings with 10-pound kettlebells, and we build up from there. Some clients never get past the 10-pound bell because they don't need to. They still get the cardio benefit, they get that power through the hips, and they really get the total body workout, and they don't need the additional weight. Now we get to a little bit more of our core focused exercises. And I've got two options for you on the plank rows. I have a side plank row as well as a 3-point row. This dumbbell row, as you see on the left, this is a great exercise. There's no denying the benefits of a dumbbell row. But going back to what makes a good exercise great is the core stabilization. Think about it. Right here, her weight is being supported by the bench, both with this knee, with this arm, and then the rest of her weight is being supported on the floor. Well, this is a great exercise, and it is a great way to make sure that we are able to isolate one side over the other. This does not utilize a lot of core stabilization. So our option for that is the side plank rowing. Now what you want to do is you want to start out so that your client gets up into a side plank position. You want to anchor the band, and keep in mind you're going to want to use a little bit lighter of a band to start with on this one, or tubing. You're going to anchor the band so that whenever their arm is extended, that there is a tightness to the band, but it is not engaged or stretched. So the band is straight, but is not engaged. To start, let me get my pointer here. To start, Mike would extend this arm out. So he would go up into a side plank, and he would extend that top arm straight out. And that's how you would decide how far he needs to start, back or forward. Then whenever he's ready, maintaining that side plank position, he is able to utilize the movement of the shoulders, keeping a nice wide stance. You'll notice there is some space right here between his chest and his arm. So he's going to bring that arm back nice and slow, nice and strong. Think about as he pulls back, the same rules as a dumbbell row apply. You still want to engage that scapula, thinking about holding that pencil with that scapula as you row back. Coming all the way back, and then this is where the exercise gets really hard. That band is going to want to pull back really fast. You must really, really, really resist as that arm extends back out. So really focus on that. Tempo is everything in this exercise. Nice and slow coming out, nice and slow extending back out. As you come in with the flexion of the arm, nice and slow as you extend back at the elbow and extend back at the shoulder. So another option would be our 3-point row. And this one is actually probably my favorite. You would have your client perform a high plank position. So there's a nice wide stance with their feet, and this hand is going to be closer to the center of the body than a standard plank, than a standard high plank. So you'd move that hand just a little bit closer to the center of the body. And then you'll want to grab your band. Whenever you grab your band, again, you'll want the band to be straight, but you won't want any resistance or anything added onto that band. So the band should be straight, but it should not be engaged or it should not be stretched. Same thing With that arm straight out, that arm is going to be an extension of the shoulder. So in that high plank position, it'll be an extension of the shoulder, and it'll be pretty close up to that ear. Then, same thing, you're going to slowly row back, keeping the elbow in nice and tight all the way through until you push into this position right here. This is your midpoint of your exercise position. So keep in mind that elbow stays in nice and tight as it comes all the way through, pointing up. The key to this is to keep the elbow as tight to the body as possible. Now, in this position, there's a couple of things you'll want to check. One, you want to make sure that they maintain the straight line of the body. Whenever they go to row, ensure that your clients aren't cheating that rear end up, that they aren't lifting that booty up. Also, make sure that they are maintaining the level between their shoulder blades. So whenever they row, they shouldn't be able to lift that shoulder blade up. They want to maintain that position. So if you need to put a dowel rod on your clients, across your client's shoulders or back, then go ahead and do that. That way they can make sure that they're able to maintain that neutral position or in the level. And also, in addition to having their shoulders and upper back level, their hips need to be maintained as level. So no opening up to the side. The reason this is great is because of the anti-rotation plus the rowing. So you're having to maintain with that core activation to really maintain to keep that body in core neutral position. So that anti-rotation is something that is really, really huge whenever you're talking about utilizing the core for this one. And it's resistance in all three planes. So you're moving in both the transverse, the frontal, as well as the sagittal plane. Still focusing on our core region, we're going to look at our plank with reach. I see that everyone is familiar with the basic crunch. It's a great exercise. It's wonderful. But here is an exercise that we can make, and it's called a plank with a reach. This is going to increase our activation of our core so much. There was a study that was done back in, I believe it was done in 2011, and it was published in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning. And it compared the basic crunch with this plank with a reach. The basic crunch versus the plank with a reach. So different people were tested on what their core activation was with a crunch, and then how much of a core activation happens with this plank with a reach. Across all people, the average was there was 7% more activation in the rectus abdominis, 11% more activation in the external oblique, and 70% more activation in the gluteus maximus by utilizing this plank with a reach. So basically, you're looking at a much more total body, much more efficient core exercise by utilizing this plank with a reach. Now here's how we get into it. You'll notice that Mike has a wide stance, and he's on an elbows and toes plank. So his elbows are down and his toes are down. This is pretty key with here. So keep in mind, use your progression of your planks. So you can go a modified plank, a high plank, and then to an elbows and toes plank. This would be your fourth progression. You will put a disc under one hand, and from that elbows and toes plank, our left arm will be on our elbow down. Our right hand is going to be on that disc. While you maintain this, you take that right arm and slide it out as far as you can. You're going to hold that position. If you hold it anywhere from, hopefully, you can hold it at least 10 seconds, but working up to holding it up as long as you would hold any other plank that you work with your clients. Now, whenever you're moving through this, I have my clients do a couple of different options with this. I have them work, instead of just sliding that hand out, I have them work with the clock. So they're holding that elbows and plank, their elbows and toes plank position, and their right hand slides up and touches where 12 o'clock would be on a clock. Then they bring it back down. Then they bring that gliding disc back out and take that gliding disc up to 1 o'clock. Bring it back down. Take it back up to 2 o'clock and back down. And I have them go all the way down to 3. And then if they're ready and able, I have them extend it out to 4 o'clock as well. I have them hold each position for anywhere from 5 to 10 seconds. So if they work through 12, 1, 2, 3 o'clock, that's 4 positions. They're holding each one anywhere from 5 to 10 seconds. Then they're holding a plank for approximately anywhere from 30 to 45 seconds, depending upon how long it takes them to transition. So keep in mind that the reason that this one is such a wonderful exercise is because it has such an significant increase, in activation across the rectus abdominis, external oblique, gluteus maximus. And so it's basically a more effective exercise than the basic crunch itself. Great exercise number 15, the kneeling lift. So talking about our basic oblique crunch, this right here is a kneeling lift. There's a couple of different ways that you can utilize this. You could attach a monster band to a low position, and basically what you're doing is a kneeling chop. So as you start to lift, your beginning position would begin down here with these hands at a lower across the body position. So to be holding right down here where that arrow is. Whenever you're ready, you would extend those arms, maintaining that straight arm position right here and rotating it all the way up to the opposite high side of the body. Now the name of the game on this one is tempo. Keep this as slow as possible. As you're moving through this different exercise, also a couple of keys to keep in mind is level. Keep these hips in neutral positions. You want to keep these hips nice and level. You want to try to keep these shoulders level as well. So don't allow your clients to cheat up or down with the hip or with the shoulder. So that way you want to make sure that while there is some rotation going on here, that they're still maintaining that neutral position with the hips. 8 to 12 reps on one side and then rotating it to the other so that they are in a balanced position. This is utilizing the position. You can see that they've utilized all the way through, that looks like a rope, so what you would be utilizing for a tricep press down. Decreased risk of lumbar rotation, because if you notice, the amount of crunch or rotation is much less with this than it is with an oblique crunch. But it's a more effective way to correct the unilateral muscle imbalances, because even whenever you're doing an oblique crunch, you're actually able to utilize your back or other areas other than your abdominals. With this one, those abdominals are engaged the entire time. And with that rotation, with that movement, those obliques are going to be engaged through everything, especially whenever we're starting to reach cross body with those arms extended. So it's a highly functional movement that goes in all three planes, because we have the rotation, we have the frontal, and we also have the sagittal motion. This is probably one of my favorite exercises, and it's the Turkish get-up. Whenever you compare it with just your basic supine crunch, the Turkish get-up doesn't place the body in that excessive kyphotic posture. So there's none of that curvature that comes along with the flexion of the spine and that rotation in of the shoulders as whenever you do basic crunches. So because of that, it's really minimizing the stress to the lumbar spine because you're not as much spinal flexion. We're going to break this Turkish get-up down in pieces. So first thing that you're going to do is you are going to get down on the floor in a supine position. So we're going to be on our back. We're going to start off with our kettlebell in our left arm. So our left arm is going to be extended up as an extension of our spine, reaching tall up to the ceiling. Our right arm is going to be out in a lower Y position. So it is about halfway, about a 45-degree angle between your leg and your lower arm. Our left knee is bent and our left foot is flat on the floor, as you can see Mike showing here, and our right leg is extended. So left arm reaches high to the sky, right arm is all the way down 45 degrees from the lower body, left knee bent, foot flat on the floor, right leg extended. The first option or the first movement is to be maintaining a straight position, crunching up to that elbow. So this position right here that you see Mike in, This is the first position. Coming up to that elbow, keep in mind that I should be on that kettlebell the entire time. Our second position, as you see Mike's in right here, this is our first position. Our second position is to press the body up, utilizing the core muscles. Keep pressing the body up, pressing that bell all the way up to the sky, and you're going to extend these hips right here. So this is our third position right here. So first position, flat down on the back, left arm extended up, right arm is straight down 45 degrees from the lower body. Crunch up, so you come up onto that right elbow. Eye is on the kettlebell, pressing it up to the ceiling. Next position is to press that bell up to the position, extending out our right arm as we extend our hips up. And that is the position you see, that third picture on the lower right side. Then you have to reverse it, slowly lowering the body back down, all the way back down so that your hips become back to a rest on the floor. Then slowly lowering your body so that you come back to a bend position of the elbow, and slowly lowering the body back to your beginning position, which is this position right here. So keep in mind, they all go in stages, nice and slow. So you keep that position and then crunch up to the position up on the elbow, extending all the way up so that right arm is extended, and finally lifting through the hips all the way up. And that is your half Turkish get-up. This is going to utilize all the core muscles because it's going to go all the way through both on the crunch as you come up and that lift as you come up, and that extension is going to be utilizing the oblique muscles because you can notice that there is a little bit of rotation in the body. Minimizes the stress to the lumbar spine because we're not in that forward spinal flexion position. And it also improves our T-spine mobility, our hip mobility, and our shoulder stability because as you notice in this picture right here, that shoulder is in a very pat position. All right. Well, as I told you before, we have completed now our full webinar. I'll give you a quick review on how to gain your CEC. You are going to go to exerciseetc.com, click on the Administration tab on the left-hand side of the screen, then click on Webinar on Demand Certificates, complete all required fields, and click Submit. Your continuing education certificate will appear on the screen, so either save it to your desktop or print it. Even if you do not have a working printer, make sure you save this form because there is a fee if you have to replace continuing education certificates. And now that you have viewed the entire webinar, you don't have to worry about the WebEx program recording when you log on or whenever you log off. As previously promised, I do give you my email address in case you have any questions. And I'm going to, I just wrote it in that, but it comes on a weird color. So I'm going to tell it to you as well as type it. It is aprilbolter@hotmail.com. APRIL, B as in boy, OULTER@hotmail.com. You can flip back to slide number 2 and see my full name, aprilbolter@hotmail.com. No spaces and no dashes. And that is a way that you can contact me if you have any questions about anything in this webinar, or if you have any questions about any clients that you may have that you're not for sure how to handle. I'm happy to help in any way possible. I thank you so much for spending your last couple of hours with me and with Exercise Etc., talking about how to make your exercises from good to great. Good luck with all of your clients and have a wonderful, wonderful day.